In this next video, we will read in the inputs and build one interface tab. We will do that to read in the client's actuals and plan. So let's head right over to Excel and do that. There are 4 input tabs that we use in this business plan model. 3 of them you already know from planning short-term liquidity. So let me just quickly go over these. First, we have the accounts tab that contains the current accounts, the overdraft facility and bank loans. Here on the right hand side, you can also see details for the bank loans and interest expenses on a monthly timeline, so just as we need them here. Next, we have the payroll. Remember that for the short-term liquidity, we read this in on a weekly base, but here we can just go with these monthly numbers for salary, social contributions, taking into consideration FTE. Then we have the investments and depreciation. So here we assume that we open a store at the end of each quarter, which comes with some investment of 400k. We assume a useful life of 10 years, and this is the investment and depreciation schedule. Next, we have a new tab actually, so this was not used already in the short-term liquidity model. I gave a quick introduction to this when I introduced this section of the course in general, but here just a short recap. 2021, 2022, we have actuals for these years on an annual base, and then starting January 2023, it's on a monthly base. Here you can see this is the first forecast or plan month. The difference really just is that forecast is a near-term plan. So for example, here we have some booked payables for the next 4 to 5 weeks maybe, and that's why it's called forecast rather than plan, but it's really not that much of a difference. Down here we have the income statement, so I know this is a bit the other way around, but it's just the way it is, so client data is not always perfect. And for the income statement, we have this plan here or forecast in the short run on a monthly base all the way through to the end of 2027. And what we need to do here is to map this to our structure, which is why we have this ID column here with the mapping. And this also brings us to the interface tab. So here you can see again those IDs and our line items that we set up in the setup tab. So we will read in the data on a monthly base for the years that come on an annual base like 2021 and 2022. We will distribute these equally by dividing by 12. We need to make sure for the line items in the income statement that we read in income items with positive signs and cost items multiplied by -1, so with a negative sign. Then we can scroll down to the balance sheet. For the balance sheet, we are not supposed to distribute this equally like we did for the income statement, because this wouldn't make sense. So here I will just read in this data. And down here you will note, there's a check, like always, to make sure that we equal assets and liabilities and equity. But there's no working capital plan down here and no balancing, and that's just because this tab is really just for reading in the client data and not manipulating it in any way. So let's go back to the top and I will give you a walkthrough of the formulas. Let's start with this one. What this is doing is, this is a sum-if statement that's just reading in from this tab that we just saw, so the client's actual and plan. It's referring to the column for 2021, that's column G. We have a condition here, so we want to look up based on this ID. There can be multiple line items that go into this. I don't think it's the case for sales. Here we just have this one, but there might be some things, like for example here, for what is this? I think it's other operating income that we may want to integrate, for example, here in this other line. So besides that, we want to make sure to multiply this with 1 divided by 12 to distribute it across the month, as this comes as an annual value. And then we multiply it by this one, which doesn't imply a change just because, well, these numbers come all as positive numbers, but here we need to transform some to negative numbers. And as a last thing, we want to convert this from euros to K euros, as we will use K euros throughout the model. Now when we scroll over to the right, so to the beginning of 2023, we no longer need to distribute those annual values to the months, so the formula changes here as well. We still go with some if statement, and the difference here is that we do not directly provide the column, but instead we provide an index formula. So we look up between columns G and BP what we need, but we will not just get individual cells, we will get entire column vectors. This is why we, in here, between those two commas, we do not provide anything, which just means that Excel will return, well, a column. So the entire vector, so this is a matrix, and we will return a column because we do not provide anything here to slice as a row. And the column that we will return is determined by this. So it's the column for January 2023. Other than that, what do we have in here? Well, as it's a sum ifs wrapper formula here, we need this criteria range. So in the criteria range, we want to get those line items with this ID as usual for the sales here. We need to multiply with 1, which doesn't make a difference here. And we need to transform euros to K euros. Other than that, there's not that much going on in the income statement. So for example, we still get those sums here on the vertical axis. When we scroll down here, for example, to the interests, you will note that I use here just the same formula as up here. So this is not special here. The reason for that is that this is really just a read-in. I don't intend to incorporate any, well, knowledge besides that here. And down here, same thing for the balance sheet. So really nothing special going on in terms of the formulas. So as a next step, please head over to your download folder and make sure to get these Excel files, as we will now read them in as input tabs. As we can see over here, we will just set up the structure now in our plan. So over here in the model that we are about to build, I just added these tabs. I also copied the accounts, payroll, investments, and actuals and plan data. So don't think I need to show you how to do this. And well, for the interface tab, as usual, let's get the template from over here. So I will just make sure to copy all this. And then here I will paste the formats, I will paste the column widths, and I will paste the formulas. And click yes to all, so that we will be using the constant that exists in this model here that we are building. So let's set this to 20 just to be precise. Let's go here and press Alt-W-F-F, so this is fixed now. And well, we can take it from here now. As you can see, copying those formulas just introduced a short site to do for us. So here we get those references to the workbook that this is coming from, and we don't want these in here. So, well, there are actually two ways to remove these, but we'll just go with one of them. Here under data workbook links, you have this reference as well, and you could go with break all. The problem with that is it will replace these, well, formulas without values, and that's not what we need here, because we may get updates to those input tabs. So we want to keep the formulas as such. So we will just select this part of the formula, make sure not to include that first apostrophe here. And then I will press Ctrl-A 2 times to really select everything. Paste this in here without a leading apostrophe. Replace with nothing. Place all. Now we get this. I was just wondering for a second why there was something going wrong here, but it seems to work out. So that's just what we need in here. We are directly referencing this sheet and not the sheet from the other workbook anymore. And that's already it for this video. So I understand that this was not the most exciting part of the course. Reading in data is always a bit of a mess, but here it's just important to make sure this happens in a structured way. So based on the IDs, for example, to make sure that we do not mess up the other items, for example, and well, to make this a bit flexible in case the client provides an update to the data, which can just happen. Although for the actuals, when it's the end of the year, there may just be rebookings or things like that. So this is why this is important. But now we can move on to the more interesting stuff and make the client's plan adjustable.